Good evening, everyone, and welcome from Westminster City Hall in the latest in our series of Ask the Leader programmes. Tonight, along with Leader Rachel Robotham, we're joined by Deputy Leaders Tim Mitchell and Melvin Kaplan and Councillor Heather Acton, who acts for the Council on climate change. And that's because tonight's programme has a special focus on climate change and how we're making the city cleaner and greener. But of course, the leader and the team are here to take questions on anything you'd like to ask about, whether that's our COVID response or any other subject. And the easy way to do that, if you'd like to put a question to us, is the text box on your Facebook page. But Rachel, can I start first on COVID? We've been here before. We were in these seats in April and May, looking at what the city was doing about the pandemic, and things have taken a fairly dramatic turn since then. Are the next 3 months in Westminster, can you read the road ahead, or is it indeed readable?
Well, I think it's very difficult, isn't it? Because clearly we have seen a spike up in recent weeks, and as a result, we've moved into Tier 2 restrictions. I wish that hadn't been necessary, but clearly it has been necessary. But I think what is important is to stress that actually I think we've gone into this much better prepared inevitably than we were back in March. Westminster Connects, which has over 3,000 volunteers, we've been able to stand that up again immediately so residents can feel very confident that they can access that support and help should they need to do so. We also all know what we need to do to keep safe, so I think there's a much better understanding about the amongst the general population. We've got much better testing capacity. But undoubtedly, this is a very challenging period. It's very tough for our businesses. It's very tough for our cultural institutions, which are so important for Westminster. So it's going to be a challenging time.
Well, let me pick you up on businesses, because I've read you quoted saying that you thought some businesses, their challenge was literally hanging on into Christmas and New Year. What's the council doing to help them?
Well, I think it will be incredibly difficult for some businesses through this, so we have to do everything we can. As you know, I lobbied the government very hard right at the beginning to raise the cap on business rate relief so that companies would get the help that they needed with business rates, and I'm lobbying now that needs to be extended, because clearly with these restrictions in place, companies won't be able to start paying full rate relief again at the beginning of April. But we've done a number of other things. We have a hardship fund. We've given a lot of advice and support to businesses. In terms of hospitality businesses, you'll have seen we've continued to roll over the hospitality schemes, enabling people to meet outside in restaurants and cafes and bars. And of course, that's really important because it's the only way that you can meet and have a meal with people who are not part of your household. So I know it might not be the balmy days of summer anymore, but I really want to encourage people to put on a thick coat and go out and support our businesses. And also, it's a way for them to be able to meet their friends safely.
Well, talking of weather brings us neatly to the main topic of our discussion this evening, which is, of course, climate change. Westminster City Council, of course, recognises the climate emergency. It's a major part of your policy going forward. But lots of people are perhaps used to organisations making dramatic claims and pledges about signing up to emergencies and climate issues. If I'm a Westminster resident, why am I interested in this, and why is my life going to improve?
Well, first of all, Fergus, we know that this is probably the most important issue for our residents. It comes up every single time in our surveys, quite rightly. And one of the only good things that's come out of the pandemic is it's shown us the benefits to our city from less traffic on the streets, improved air quality, the benefits in terms of people's physical and mental health. So this is a really important issue which we absolutely have to tackle. And one of the first things I did when I became leader back in January was to really raise this as a top priority for the council. I established the Climate Action Group, which Heather sits on with me, which sits above all of the cabinet portfolios and drives policy in this area. And the importance of that is it means that every decision that we take as a council, we now take through the lens of climate change. And I think that's really important.
Well, climate change is, as it were, baked through the council's approach. Now, two good questions on that can I put to you, Heather, first of all. What's the council's, from Angela, asks, what's the council's plan regarding air pollution, which of course we saw dip during the pandemic, but may possibly be creeping its way back up?
Well, we have always really prioritised dealing with poor air quality in Westminster. But as Rachel has said, under her leadership, we're really even prioritising it more. And we have a number of activities underway, which Angela can also see on our website. But, for example, we're already the largest electrical car charging scheme in the UK, and we're expanding the numbers. It's almost 1,000 points. We are dealing with our own fleet and those of our contractors to make sure that those are all the least polluting vehicles possible. We are working with businesses to make sure that they're both consolidating their freight. We've got a very innovative program looking at waste consolidation to reduce vehicles on the roads. But buildings also play a really important part in polluting. So we're, through our city plan, we're looking at how we improve development to make sure that that is the least polluting possible. And we have a very good code of construction practice. Schools as well. We have given funding to schools so that they can carry out an air quality audit and take measures to improve air quality around those schools.
Let me put this to you from Teresa and Julie. They ask, what measures has the council taken to collect food waste? And I think there from their notes they have in mind the fact that you can occasionally use that kind of waste to heat buildings and suggest that other London boroughs are doing that. So are we missing a trick there? Is that something we should be doing?
We're not missing a trick as yet. We have a pilot underway looking at collecting food waste. So it's been underway for a year now, and in that time we've worked with 7,500 households. We've taken in 244 tonnes of food waste. That's been sent to an anaerobic digester in Hertfordshire, difficult terminology.
Decode that one for me.
That processes the food waste into heat and electricity, and then the residue gets used on agricultural land. So we're taking those steps, and we will be looking to expand that further.
Rachel, can I put Karen's puts a very interesting and rather global question on this, which I'd like to pick up. What's your view on the replacement of fossil by wind, solar, and wave power?
That's a very interesting question. I think we need to look at all sorts of energy use, and wind farms absolutely play a part in that. Not in Westminster necessarily, but in different parts of the country. Clearly, we've seen a significant increase in terms of wind turbines, which play a very important part, and indeed solar power as well. So I think we need to look at all these alternative energy uses. Interestingly, actually, it's worth just stating that the council now, all of our energy, all of our electricity is from renewable sources, which I think is important. But all of these play a very important part going forward.
Heather, very direct question from Zach P, and he asks, what provisions will the council take to ensure increases in water fountains and access throughout the borough? So I think that means, do we have enough water fountains? Are they free, and where are they?
We do have a number of water fountains, and there are two things about water fountains. Obviously, the provision of safe drinking water is really important, but we also have to be very aware that water is a really precious resource. And so we're also working on making sure that we both save water, rainwater and runoff in our developments, and we've put in rainwater gardens in some areas of Westminster, and to make sure that people do value that precious resource. And I do believe on the website there's a map which shows where the water fountains are.
But this is a really good point, actually, that I think has come in, that we really want to, and as Heather was just saying, you know, we've got the information on our website, but we'd really like to hear from residents where they believe there should be more provision. It's a really important point. We want to get away from people drinking water from a single-use plastic bottle. So water fountains are part of that, and we want to hear from residents if they think there are particular places where they would be a good idea to put them, and we'll look at anything.
Rachel, far be it from me to set you against the leader of another London local authority, but I have to raise this question from Simon B, who says, please will you match or beat the City of London's climate action strategy to net zero 2040?
Actually, we are. As a council, we're aiming for 2030, as a city by 2040, and then net zero by 2050. If we can do it much more quickly, then we absolutely will. But the important thing here is it's not just about the City Council. We represent 2% of the emissions of Westminster. So the council absolutely needs to lead on this, but this is a partnership. It's a partnership with our residents, it's a partnership with our business. And part of this call tonight really is to hear from residents where they feel we can go faster, but also how we can work with them to change behaviour and to do things to really drive this faster. So I'd like to do it as quickly as possible, but we need to be working with our residents and businesses.
Well, let's go now to the first of our video reports this evening. Obviously, the work the City Council does on the environment and making the city cleaner and greener is driven by what local people tell us they want. And there's some very interesting voices from our youth MP and from our young councillors and from our residents' groups. Let's hear from some of those voices now.
Hi, my name's Chivanta Abbas and I'm the Youth MP of Westminster. Climate change is extremely important to me because it contributes to respiratory diseases such as asthma, which I used to have. I think the way to resolve climate change is through education, as education is key to everything. If we teach young people at a young age and children to recycle and to be more sustainable, I think it will help climate change and will reduce the issue.
I'm Tal Ahmadi and I'm part of the Westminster Youth Council. Climate change is important to me as it affects my future, as well as the future of many generations to come. We don't want to be making the same mistakes that other generations will have to resolve. What we can do in Westminster is change small things in our lifestyle, such as reducing our meat consumption, using less water in the shower, and just even recycling more. What can also be done in Westminster is implementing more recycling bins, so that reduces litter all over the streets, as well as the chance of it ending up in our beautiful water bodies, causing the deaths of many animals and polluting it.
My name is Mehdi. Climate change is important to me because it affects the environment I live in. And a lot of my friends have asthma, and in certain areas around Westminster they find it a bit harder to breathe, and it could cause asthma attacks sometimes for them. A good way to tackle it is to encourage more electric cars, electric scooters, or different methods of transport, such as cycling, walking, or running.
Hi, my name is Ava and I'm from Westminster Youth Council. Climate change is important to me because it's a very broad concept, something which few people understand, and they only begin to understand it when they see the physical impacts of climate change on our environment. For example, take this Pacific garbage dump, something which houses a lot of marine wildlife, but houses a lot of rubbish too, plastic. Plastic, which is made from oil, which is a finite resource, cannot be used again. It is non-renewable. Yet thousands of us use water bottles that are plastic every day. And I think that has a devastating impact on our marine wildlife.
I'd like to ask about how you can increase recycling and expand the food waste collection across the borough in order to reduce the amount of material that goes into the incinerator, because incineration does increase carbon emissions.
Rachel, first question to you on the built environment there. Our young people growing up in a city with tall, lot of buildings around them. How are environmental concerns part of the planning process? How do buildings have this built into them?
Well, Fergus, in Westminster, buildings, actually across the country, but particularly in Westminster, buildings are absolutely at the heart of this. 86% of our emissions in Westminster are from our buildings and how we use them. Not many people might realise it's as high as that, 86%. So how we build, how we use our buildings is absolutely central to this. So absolutely we need to do everything we can through our planning policies to change the way we and other developers build in Westminster. We're doing that through the city plan, which is coming forward at the moment. It's been through the judicial process and is due to be adopted next year, which will include much more ambitious, environmentally sustainable planning policies to make sure that we're building in a much more sustainable way. But also alongside that, to provide even more detail, we're producing an environmental supplementary planning document, which will also be adopted next year. So the way that we're building our properties, as well as the way we use them, will improve dramatically.
And we're also looking at retrofitting because a lot of our buildings are old buildings, but there are ways to improve their sustainability as well, and we're looking at that quite carefully too.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And just a reminder, if you want to join the debate at home, there's the question box that'll pop up on your screen. Heather, can I combine two questions? Rosemary, you heard there asking about food recycling. Same sort of questions coming from Maximilian G, who says, what are the plans to focus business on waste segregation, in particular food? So he's talking there about businesses and waste collection.
Well, there have been a couple of businesses have operated a similar food recycling scheme that I was describing earlier. And I think we will have to work more with our businesses to make sure that there is more of that food recycling. Of course, the first thing, though, is to not have food waste in the first place and to eliminate some of the young people who spoke. We need to eliminate plastic waste. So businesses have a really key responsibility here in first reducing the potential waste that they create, and then work with us to recycle what can't be reduced.
But I think as a general point on recycling, let me be honest. I think clearly we need to do a lot better across the board in Westminster. Our recycling rate is only 21%, and so that's something that we as the council need to make it much easier for people to recycle, both businesses and residents. But we also need our residents to work with us on this, to change their behaviours around recycling more. So this is absolutely something that we need to work on, but we need to do this in partnership.
What behaviours do you want changed? What do you think they're not doing?
I think people need to be much clearer, and this is what we can help with, much clearer about what they can and can't recycle, but also to really be much more rigorous in terms of recycling everything they possibly can.
Heather, something with your public protection hat on has come in. Paolo asks, what are you going to do with bicycles on pavements? And he seems particularly exercised by Westbourne Grove, which he says has become unsafe. So something that should encourage green transport. Now, there are bikes lying about Westbourne Grove. Is that something you recognise?
Bikes lying about or being used on the pavement, because we certainly don't want bikes lying around, and we have been putting in a number of cycle hangars, which are safe places for people to store their own bicycles safely. Of course, we've also got a number of cycle schemes around Westminster. It is not permissible to cycle on our pavements, but the police and our city inspectors take action when that is seen. But I would urge all cyclists to cycle responsibly and certainly not dump their cycles on pavements.
Well, Heather, I'm afraid you're not getting off the hook on cycling, because a question has come in from Pierre, who asks, how are you planning to help residents securely lock their bikes in residential areas, and will you be rolling out bike hangers on all streets?
Well, we do have a waiting list for cycle hangers, but we are responding to those requests, and there are a number of cycle hangers due to go in. Get your name down on a waiting list for hangers. On our estates, we're already putting hangers as well for safe and secure bike parking. So work with us and you will be able to get a safe space for your bicycle.
There's another 50 hangars going in from the beginning of November, and more behind that. So we're absolutely actively looking all the time for spaces. We know, as Heather was just saying, that there's a lot of demand for them. We do have to go through the consultation process because clearly this is taking up in some areas parking space for cars, etc. So we need to consult with other residents to make sure that we found the right area. So there is a bit of a lead in time, but we absolutely know we need to put more hangars in, and safe cycle storage is important.
Heather, two specific energy questions perhaps you could address. Mark T asks, what schemes are there to help us put in double glazing or move away from gas boilers?
Well, that's a tricky question. One has already been referred to by the leader, our new city plan. We are looking at how we can encourage people to use double glazing. The gas boilers, there are national schemes for converting from gas boilers. So
absolutely, which we support. We're also actually closer to home. Our own PDHU, the Pimlico District Heating Unit, which covers all of Pimlico. Obviously, we're moving away from the gas boiler there to low carbon heat pumps to drive the engines, which will be really important. But going back to the point on double glazing, it's actually quite important that just a couple of weeks ago, actually, we agreed a new policy which is much more supportive of slim double glazing being able to be used in our older properties. You know, one of the issues in Westminster is we've got these amazing heritage properties. It's a beautiful historic city. We need to safeguard that, but it's not a museum. We need to be able to retrofit where appropriate so that our buildings can be much more energy efficient. So I think the policy around double glazing, which we've now agreed, is a very sensible balance.
A couple of questions again. This is really on back to pollution. From Zach asks, engine idling is a huge problem in our borough in terms of air quality. There are already fines, but many drivers take no notice.
Well, we have all our traffic marshals request any driver they see idling their engine to turn it off. If it is not turned off, this is when they're stationary. If it's not turned off, then they can get a warning, and if that isn't heeded, then they can be fined. We've had a huge campaign advising drivers of vehicles not to idle their engines, and around all our schools there are notices showing how dangerous it is for engines to be idling. So we continue to with our anti-engine idling campaign, and the more electric vehicles that we have on our streets, the fewer engines we'll have idling.
Indeed.
Rachel, can I put this to you from Alison R? And it's a question about really sort of public protection, but how do you expect residents to change their behaviour towards recycling, which you were just talking a moment ago, when they constantly report rubbish left out on our street?
In terms of fly tipping, perhaps?
Well, I think Alison's referring to rubbish or bags dumped on the street.
Yeah. I mean, fly tipping is always a problem, which we're always tackling. And if there's any suggestion, if any residents have any idea who's doing it, sometimes it's a building site or whatever, then please let us know. But we will always tackle fly tipping and litter dumping whenever we find it. But that is a different issue to recycling. Recycling is hugely important in terms of we need to increase the percentage of recycling. We want to make sure that we're making it as easy as possible for our residents to do that. So in certain parts of the city where we have the big bins, we're looking at how we can redesign those to make them even easier for people to use for recycling. But we want to work with our residents to make sure that we can do everything we can to support them to recycle as much as possible.
And we still have a fantastic collection system for rubbish and for recycling. We're looking at shifting to a higher proportion of collection of recycled goods rather than rubbish. The residents should also be working with us so that we should never see bags on the street.
Well, let's go now to the second of our video reports. Obviously, what the Council does on environment and cleaner and greener policy isn't about pledges, it's about practical action. And across the city, from low emission neighbourhoods to charging points for electric vehicles to making our construction sites cleaner and greener, a green future is being built right now. We sent our reporter Maddie Cross to have a closer look.
Here we are on Sutherland Avenue in Maida Vale, or as we like to call it, Electric Avenue. Lamp columns on this street and the streets nearby have all been converted to allow residents to charge electric vehicles. This is part of our commitment to helping residents make the switch to cleaner and greener electric vehicles. By the end of the year, we'll have over 1,000 charging points across the city, with commitments to roll out hundreds more in years to come. This is part of our efforts to ensure that we improve air quality across the city.
I'm in Marylebone, which is our flagship scheme to improve air quality, where we have done many interventions, such as our emissions-based parking surcharge, which we have now rolled throughout Westminster, and our anti-idling campaign, for which we received an award, to encourage drivers to switch off their vehicles while they're waiting. We've done many public realm improvements, such as the rain gardens, which you can see behind me. We have planted more trees, we have introduced more electric charging points, we have more zebra crossings to encourage people to walk more, we have more cycling facilities. We are doing all we can, and I'm supporting everything I can to improve air quality for our residents and for our visitors in Westminster.
Well, regeneration is a fantastic opportunity where in the past, when you're trying to retrofit things into old buildings, it's quite hard. But when you're doing brand new buildings, as we're doing here, we can have the top and newest technology, the most carbon neutral or carbon free type sort of facilities. So what we're going to do here is something incredibly innovative, which is going to make a massive contribution to reducing our carbon footprint. And that's why it's really, really exciting, because when you do new developments like this, you can actually do the best of the best and the latest technology that allows you to reduce that carbon footprint. And that is incredibly important when we've got the climate emergency. This is going to make a massive contribution in that area.
Rachel, we're getting a lot of questions coming in on general topics now. Key among them is obviously COVID. Can I ask, first of all, COVID testing? Again, I've seen you quoted you were unhappy about the amount of testing available in Westminster. Are you happier now? Has enough been done?
Absolutely. We lobbied very hard for much more testing capacity in Westminster. The whole test and trace system is vital to being able to control this disease, to knowing who's infected, and then to be able to enable other people to self-isolate so that it doesn't get passed on. So testing and testing capacity is right at the heart of that. And actually, I'm really pleased that the response has been to significantly increase the testing capacity now in Westminster. We have three local testing sites, plus the mobile unit still in Hyde Park. So we have a number of areas covered right across the city.
Tim, can you pick up on that?
Absolutely. So we've massively increased the number of testing appointments available in Westminster, and we are working to identify further sites and hopefully options for residents to be able to go directly to a testing site without having to pre-book an appointment. And we think that's a really important way of tackling the fear and uncertainty that sadly some people have about getting tested. And if I might move on to talk about our care homes, because obviously the most vulnerable people in our community live in our care homes. We've got a fantastic new care home in Shelham Road W9 with 184 beds. And that, along with all the other care homes in Westminster, now has a regime for regular testing of the residents and their staff. And now we also have a pilot scheme in place for testing some of the residents' relatives as well, so that they can continue to visit their relatives, because that's obviously very important, particularly for residents who are living with dementia.
Melvyn, can I go to one of the, well, in fact, to your report in the package just now from EBRI? How can you guarantee that really environmental concerns are part of schemes like that? And secondly, a question we were asked earlier, is an eco house an expensive house?
So I think the important thing, as I mentioned in the video, is that when you're building a brand new sort of area, as Ebury Bridge is, you get opportunities that you rarely get to actually do the best of the best, as I mentioned in that sort of report, and the ability to actually genuinely say going forward that there's no excuses for not doing the right technology and the most up-to-date technology. And so I think, our pledge is very, very clear. Are spending a huge amount of money on these schemes, and we are absolutely committed to making sure that they are as carbon neutral, as low carbon as they possibly can be. And I think the technology we're using is the latest and the best, and we know that because we're going around checking, not just in this country, but we've checked in other parts of the world, that we are absolutely doing the best thing that can actually be done.
Well, we've got a lot of questions coming in on COVID now, unsurprisingly. Perhaps I can take a number of those as we go. Rachel, for you from Rowley S asks, how can residents participate with the council to help? Are volunteers needed for anything? So Rowley is throwing his or her hat in the ring there.
Well, Rowley, that's great that you want to volunteer. Yes, please. You can absolutely volunteer through Westminster Connects. We have this fabulous volunteering network. We send out a weekly email to all of our volunteers, setting out what the volunteering opportunities are that week. It might be delivering food, it might be making masks, it might be helping support a care home, whatever the opportunities are. So people can sign up for those that they wish to support with. So yes, please go to our website and sign up. That would be great.
If I could add to what Rachel's saying, we're also looking for community health champions who help get our messages out about COVID-19 to the community in an unstructured way, so people making contact with their friends and neighbours to be able to deliver the information about the local testing sites that Rachel just talked about, but also the other messages about keeping you and your family safe. So that's another way that you can volunteer to help during this second wave.
And I think the other important point to mention, and it might not be relevant for Rowley, I don't know, but we have a number of communities where English is an additional language, and so it's very important to have members of their community who can explain to them about how to how to register for a test, where to go, and how to do that to sort of help them through the process. I think is very important.
Melvyn, as Finance Chief for the Authority, here's one for you. Izzy B asks, what help have you been giving to businesses affected by COVID?
Well, having the finance portfolio is tough at the best of times, but certainly since I took it over back when Rachel became leader early in the year, it's certainly been a tough baptism. But I think the important thing is that what we've learned over the last sort of few months is that we've had to do things very differently. And so what we've done, the hospitality schemes that Rachel sort of mentioned earlier on, it's something where we've recognised that here's a group of people that's vitally important to the city that have been really struggling. And so we didn't do the normal exercise of sitting back for some months developing plans. We put things in place really quickly, and we recognised that they needed outside space. People didn't, sort of feel comfortable always going inside a restaurant. So we set up a whole bunch of schemes, more than 50 in total, that allowed this extra space where the hospitality industry could operate. And it's been incredibly successful. Thousands and thousands of people have actually sort of been there. So that's been one of the things. And one of the other important things, the government announced a series of grants earlier in the year, and we took it as our mission to get that money out to those businesses really quickly. There's no point in people having grants if it takes months to give them over. So we were absolutely proud that we were one of the first, if not the first, local authority to get all that money, some £90 million worth of grants into those businesses really quickly. So we've been absolutely on the side of businesses, because without those businesses, we as residents of the city are not going to have, a sort of great time here. So we recognised we had to do everything we could, and I think we have done, a pretty good job on that.
And just a reminder to everyone at home, if you'd like to put a question to us, there is a text box which will pop up on the Facebook page. Rachel, can I put this question to you from Barbara C? Why doesn't Westminster charge more for parking in order to reduce traffic and improve air quality?
Well, it's a very good question, and actually we are looking at introducing an emissions-based traffic policy, traffic charging policy, so that we would be charging more for the higher polluting vehicles. But there's a number of ways that we need to work with our residents to reduce traffic usage, and I think actually a lot of them are working very well. We know from our parking stats that residents are using fewer cars. The other issue that we have to tackle on our roads is the amount of commercial waste vehicles and delivery vans, and we do have policies in place which we're pursuing to make sure that we can do what we can to consolidate some of that traffic.
Question here, and again, this could be perhaps, Melvyn, for you or for the leader, from Tom M. Post-COVID, will you pioneer converting the huge empty office spaces into low-cost retrofitted housing to address the housing crisis?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about the whole planning debate is that our original assumptions about what should be office, what should be residential, all those debates, I think are sort of up for grabs. And what's really important is that we work with local communities, to work out what is the best solution, for various sort of areas. But, it's certainly the case that we are not opposed at all to seeing, more residential. We have a massive programme of building affordable housing, and that's something, that we want to sort of continue. So the idea that if office space reduces in some areas to have more housing is one that we would welcome. And I think, there's a lot of people that are already looking at that. But, these things change sort of over time, so you can't just say that's going to be the answer. What we want to do is to have much more affordable housing in the city. And I think that kind of conversion of some office units will be appropriate. Not everywhere, but it will be appropriate, I think, in some areas.
Tim, with your deputy leader hat on, Nikki H asks, now that road speed limit is 20 miles an hour, how can you make sure that motorists and bike riders stick to it?
Well, that's a really important question. I have been working across London with my colleagues to lobby the police traffic enforcement team to increase the amount of enforcement that they do at the moment. And that has led to a change in the way that the police work. So now community support officers as well as police officers are able to issue fines. But it's also equally important to educate people on the speed limit. So throughout the city, and I'm thinking of Melvin's ward here, we've been putting up automated traffic speed signs to warn people that if they are exceeding the speed limit. And we hope the combination of those hard and soft measures will contribute to a further reduction in speeds across Westminster.
Question I think will go to Rachel. Obviously, one of the things we've observed during COVID, there was a big spike in rough sleeping and numbers here. Very specific question from Damien A, and he asks, what's Westminster doing to help homeless people who regularly congregate on Marsham Street and Horsefree Road? Is that a problem you're aware of?
We have a problem across many parts of the city, including there. We have a very thorough rough sleeping service, 24/7 outreach on our streets, and 365 days a year. We have more than enough hostel places for all people. The main point is how we persuade them to actually come in and access services so that we can tackle the issues that they're facing. For many people, they are entrenched on the streets there for whatever reason. It may be that they have substance misuse issues or mental health issues, and it's very difficult in many cases to persuade them to accept help and to come inside. But that's why we need to continue challenging this. We're constantly looking at ways that we can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of what we do to help those who find themselves on our streets, and improve the way that we can move them rapidly through the system so that they end up ideally in sustainable housing.
Melvyn, you were nodding there. Do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think as Rachel says, I think, we're under no illusions how difficult a problem this is. It's something, it's been around as an issue for quite a long time. But I think as Rachel says, one thing that's happened during the pandemic is that we've absolutely, in a way that has never been done before, reached out, to these groups of people, in a major sort of way. And, some problems are very, very difficult and intractable. But it very much is the case that, people that will engage with us, we can, provide, sort of accommodation for them. And it's just, it is something which it's absolutely not for the want of trying. And, a number of people, myself included, have been out with some of the teams, to actually, visit some of the people, on the streets. And, one should not underestimate how difficult this is. They do an amazing job sort of out there, but certainly we are absolutely committed, where people will accept, our offers of help, absolutely we will do that. And we'll keep doing it with some people that find it difficult to engage, but we will still keep engaging to try and, help them.
Tim, let me switch subject. You, of course, have a technology role at London councils. Can I put this question to you? And this is the million-dollar one from Gail W. She asks, when will all streets within Westminster have fibre broadband, particularly as many of us are increasingly working from home? So that's the Zoom Microsoft Meetings community there, Tim.
Absolutely, and that's really important. Sadly, a few years ago, Westminster was one of the bottom boroughs in the whole of the country, and we've had a community broadband champion who has been working with council officers. So now the situation is nearly reversed, but it's not good enough. So we've been working very intensively with the fibre broadband providers, G Networks and others, to ensure that every single street has fibre capability. We're not there yet, but we are confident within the next 12 months that the 99, if not 100% of the city will have full fibre capability.
Well, obviously, yeah, for everyone who's working at home in that huge community will be pleased to hear that. Less pleased, Rachel, is Yolanda, who's written in to say, what is the council actively doing to stop people dropping litter?
Well, I think it's a good question, and I think it's not just the council. Actually, this is one, again, where we need to be in partnership with our residents, because this isn't litter, but people always say to me in my ward about dog poo bags left on the pavement, and I say, well, but this is not people from outside who are coming in and doing this. This is our own residents. So dropping litter, once again, it's our own residents. We certainly do everything we can with our street inspectors, city inspectors who are on the streets the whole time, working with our bids and other local community organisations. But I think it's something that we all need to do. If we see someone dropping litter, we need to very politely remind them that actually they shouldn't be doing that.
Can I switch to something, well, schools have gone back, as we know, it's half term this week, but parents have been, I think, in many cases, happily seeing their children go back. One question here asking about parents in cars dropping and picking up their children, and this is the school run. I wonder, could you talk to school roads? Perhaps, Rachel, you could start.
Yeah, so this was one of the school streets. This was one of the measures that we put in place working with schools with sort of temporary barriers at drop-off and collection time so that parents can walk their children safely to school. And those have worked very well. The schools administer themselves. It's a very short period of time that the barriers are in place, so it doesn't cause very much disruption to other people who are using those streets. And I think it's really made a big difference. But I would encourage all residents, in Westminster, most people live actually quite close to the schools that their children go to. Not all of them, I understand, but most of them. So I would really encourage them, rather than jumping in a car, think about walking just that bit extra for your child. It's healthy, it's exercise, but it's also going to improve air quality, which is good for your child and as well as yourself.
Well, we're coming nearly to the end of our time. Can I get a quick concluding thought from Tim and Melvin, and then I'll ask you, Rachel, to wrap up the session for us?
The important work which the council has been doing in keeping COVID at bay is a job not only for us but for the wider community. As Rachel has mentioned, in the context of air quality, it's also very important that residents heed all the messages and that they also communicate to their neighbours how important it is to keep social distancing in place and also to act safely. Because it's really, really important that we get through this winter without a second wave of the magnitude which we faced back in the spring.
Melvin, can you sum up for us?
Yeah, I think that The last point I would want to make is that despite of COVID and everything that's been going on, we're absolutely determined, part of my portfolio, the regeneration portfolio, to build affordable houses in this city, because there will be a time post-COVID, and it's really, really important that we've continued that programme as we have over sort of recent months, and we will over the next sort of few years, because for me, as that sort of side of the portfolio, there's nothing more important than providing, the best part of 2,000 affordable homes, which we will deliver over the next few years.
And finally, Rachel, can you sum up council priorities for the next 3 months ahead? What are we going to see and hear coming from the City Council?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is over the next 3 months is we are going to do everything we can to support our residents through this. I know for many people this is a very worrying time, particularly for our older communities, for people who have underlying health conditions. So I want them to know that we are here to help them and support them. We have a fabulous volunteer network, but also wide range of council services which are there, and advice and help which is there to support them. So I want our residents to know that. I want our businesses to know that we understand how tough this is for them and how challenging, and we will do everything we can to help them, to lobby on their behalf to government, to find innovative ways that we can help them come through this and survive this, because we understand how challenging it is, and we also understand how important they are to the City of Westminster. So when we come through this, when we're talking hopefully not too distant future and things are much better, I hope we've got all those businesses still there, still providing the wonderful services to our residents. But finally, and on the topic of as this session tonight was really focused on climate change, I want our residents and indeed our businesses to know that this is a top priority for our council. We're going to work as hard as we can. We know we don't have all of the answers, so that's why this is important to start the conversation now with our residents. We want to hear their views, we want to hear their ideas, we want to hear from them where they think that we could be going faster, or things that they're concerned about that we're doing that they don't think meets these agendas. So this is part of the dialogue that I want to have with our residents, because I want them to know that I am absolutely determined that we will meet these climate change targets that we've set ourselves, and I will do everything possible to deliver on that. So I want them to be in under no illusion that we will work as hard as we can. We're working towards having a climate action plan in place early 2021, and I look forward to hearing everyone's views and opinions.
Well, that's all we have time for here tonight. Can I say thank you very much to everyone who's logged on and joined us, and thank you to our councillors here in the studio. We've tried to answer as many questions as we can on air tonight, and we will respond to everyone who's asked a question tonight. Open Forum returns in the new year, and if you've got any questions or topics you'd like us to look at, please get in touch and tell us what they are. But in the meantime, for this evening, good night from City Hall.